All right, as you make your way to your seats, let me get your attention for a moment. So if you don't have your notes, you should be able to pick some up at the back, right there in the stand in the middle. So grab those. If you are of the electronic persuasion, there's a QR code there. Scan that. You can get a digital copy of the notes for this morning. And that's going to be awesome. Having a good time? Sweet. It's always awesome to talk about discipleship and those relationships. And so at this time, I'm going to pause for just a moment and tell some jokes. For those of you who are interested in jokes, I have no jokes actually. So if you guys have some, go ahead and bring them up here. I'll give you the mic. We'll just do some improv together, right? So it's always awesome to improv while you're waiting on things. And so no, that's okay. Take your time. It's not awkward up here at all. All right. Yeah, it's always difficult trying to get your microphones on and all that kind of stuff, you know. So we understand that. So I'm going to introduce David Allred. He is a former member of Oakland Heights. You can come on up. And he's in Portland with Thomas doing a church plant. And so that's really, really cool, really awesome. And I'm looking forward to hearing what David has for you. And so let me pray and we'll get started. Father, we love you. We thank you so much for your mercy, your grace, your kindness. And what a privilege it is to open up your word and just to see these principles of discipleship and how we can be better followers of you, and also how we can learn to follow other people. You know, we need someone to be following. And so we're so grateful that we have men that we can follow and look up to. And but most of all, we're so thankful for your word, because without you, we can do nothing. I pray for David as he opens your word and teaches us some things about discipleship and what those principles look like. God, I pray that you bless it. I pray that you bless him and bless our time together this morning. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right. If you give me just a second, I'm going to get settled in. I think I hear myself, so I guess this is working. Yes, as Michael said, my name's David Allred. I am currently in Portland, but I always say that I'm from Oakland Heights. Not originally, but this is where I grew up, so it feels like home, and it feels like home to be back. So I am really excited to share with you. As you said, we've been in Portland a couple of years now. I'm really excited to try to share with you some things that God's taught me. For those of you who don't know me, I do want to just kind of by way of introduction, share a little bit of a testimony. I always enjoy hearing the people that I've never met, like just kind of hearing their background a little bit and where they came from. So I do want to start and not use a ton of my time, but I do want to just start with a little bit of a testimony. So I grew up in a Christian home. I probably have a very similar testimony to a lot of you guys. You know, I can't really say there was ever a time that I didn't know or believe who God was. You know, my parents are missionaries. Many of you guys know them. They've been on the field in Mexico going on 28 years now. So I grew up on the mission field. I grew up involved in ministry from a young age. You know, it was really always part of our life. So I don't have this crazy testimony of like I was lost and I had no idea what was going on. You know, I grew up, I'm very thankful that I grew up in a home that truly modeled, you know, a life of mission and purpose. So I'm so thankful to have them as examples, and still do. Like I said, they're still on the field and still working, and have brothers. My brother, Chris, a lot of you guys know, is on staff here as a pastor, and so just a lot of examples to look up to. And so anyways, when I turned 18, all of us, you know, we moved back to the States when we turned 18, and it's kind of a difficult transition when you're moving out of the house, and especially I can understand now as a parent, thinking of my kids being 18 and like, okay, move back to a different country by yourself. So my parents asked all of us to go to 1 year of Bible college. And so I did that. All of us did that at some point. We moved back. They said, go to Bible college 1 year. We don't care if you graduate, don't care if you stay, but just take 1 year, learn how to live on your own, learn how to live in another country, pray about what God wants you to do next. So I did that. Thankful I did. I met my wife, Lori, at college. I didn't stay. I did 1 year, joined the Navy and left. We were dating though, so thankfully that changed a lot of my plans in a good way. So I joined the Navy. She finished school. I left and did a lot of training and came back. We got married right after that. Then I finished out the rest of my time with a reserve battalion. So we stayed right there together in Florida. And, I wouldn't say that right off the bat, we weren't running from the Lord. It wasn't like, all right, now we're just going to go do our own thing and figure it out and get away from our faith. We weren't running from the Lord, but a mistake that I did make early in my adulthood was I really took for granted, that there were good disciple-making churches everywhere. We were sent out of Decatur Baptist in '96. It's all I ever knew. My parents started a church that was very much like-minded in the same thread as what we left. I came back, to a church that had a Bible college, so maybe a little bit more structured in a different way, but still, very much a like-minded kind of a thing. So, I just took for granted that, that's what churches are everywhere. So we kind of started off our life thinking okay, well, wherever we end up, we kind of followed where we landed in jobs and things, but we'll just find a church. And then we realized that kind of just didn't work out very well. And, and I say that we weren't in a bad church. It wasn't, it was fine. Doctrine was fine. People were great. It wasn't like we were in a bad place, but we knew that we were not really going to grow there. There wasn't discipleship. There wasn't evangelism. And I did know enough to know that it was missing. I could see the plan is just we'll just come on Sunday morning and, sit here and just listen. But there was kind of no plan for you to grow beyond that. And so we kind of got to a point in our life we knew that we needed to find a church where we could grow, to be involved in ministry, and otherwise we were just going to kind of be there because we never left, and I think for a lot of people that's what happens. You don't end up where you are because you planned it, you just never left there. And so it was right around the time our kids were really young, and we realized we were at places where I was a firefighter at the time, I'm kind of settling into my career, and it was we're just going to end up never leaving here, and we know that God's telling us we need to go somewhere. And that's what led us to moving up here to Cartersville and coming to Oakland Heights. So that's why I say I count myself as being from Oakland Heights, kind of as a transplant. And that's going on over 10 years now. It wasn't random. We've known Joe and Debbie since, I would say they've known my parents since before we were born. So we knew Oakland Heights. And in fact, it was a conversation with my dad where I said, this is where we're at. I can tell that spiritually, I don't think you can just really stagnate and actually that be good. It's either you're growing or you're sliding backwards. And I feel like by default, we're just kind of sliding into doing nothing. And my dad told me, he said, well, if I had to come off the field and move somewhere to be a part of a church, I would go to Oakland Heights and move to Cartersville. And so that's really where we started praying about it and saying, okay, well, then we need to figure out how to make that happen. And to keep things brief, because I'm eating into my time here, God just moved pretty miraculously that very quickly we were able to move up here, change jobs. We came here, got plugged in. So we came here kind of right away with a desire to get involved and grow. And so we pretty quickly got involved in discipleship. We, served in a few different ministries and things, preschool, stuff like that. But as we grew, we went through discipleship, went through MT and LT ministry training, leadership training, probably like D2 for I think a lot of you guys. And the more we were involved in ministry, I served as a deacon, and Lori and I we led the children's ministry together for several years, all the way up until we turned that over, and we left to be a part of this church plant in Portland. And so we're going on almost 2 years ago since we were sent out with Thomas and the rest of the team. And so I just kind of want to start with sharing my testimony. Like I said, I always enjoy hearing a little bit of a backstory and a testimony of the people that I'm hearing from. And at the same time, I kind of want you guys to know, I don't feel like I'm a really special person, and I don't mean this in some false sense of modesty that I think sometimes it comes across that way, but truly, God's allowed us to be a part of a lot of special things, but it's not really because of us. We've just been kind of not just in the right place at the right time, but God's put us in the right place at the right time. And so my hope is that today I can just simply share some things that God has taught us, some things that I've learned from a lot of others along the way. And as I look around the room, it's a little intimidating because I learned it from a lot of you guys that I'm sitting here looking at. And so it feels weird to kind of regurgitate back the very points and principles that I learned from you. And so I think a lot of people feel this way, but they feel a little intimidated. And so this is really, a lot of my time is not geared towards the pastors in the room, but I want to gear my time. I'm not a pastor, I'm just a guy. I went with Thomas. I'm just there serving with him. He calls me his co-planter, which I think is a very generous title. But I really hope that my time can be geared towards people that are like me. Like maybe you're in a ministry position, but you're still growing and learning and developing as a leader, but you're probably in a position where now you've been given responsibility to lead others. And that's really intimidating when you're like, man, I'm trying to grow myself. If you're in ministry training or leadership training, you feel like you're still figuring a lot of things out, but then now yet you have to help someone else grow along with you. And that's an intimidating thing. And so what I tried to do is put together kind of some principles that were the most influential to me along the way. So I'm dividing that into two sections. I'm starting with 4 personal principles that are, I called it 4 personal principles for a developing leader, and we're going to be in Matthew 15, 32 through 37. And then the second part of it is 4 ministry principles for a developing leader. So we're going to start with these personal principles in Matthew. So if you want to start flipping to Matthew 15, kind of as I was praying and preparing to speak this week, I was reading through Matthew, and I just happened to see these notes that I had written like in the margins of my Bible, and that's really what led me to land on this passage for this. So a lot of it's going to be devotional. I'm going to pull out some principles and, like I said, things that God has dealt with me and taught me over the last few years is what I'm going to try to point out for you, and hopefully there will be something you can get from it. I know we've prayed a lot of times, but I would also like to just stop and still my own mind and my heart and pray for myself. So I don't hear pages rustling, so I think everyone's kind of where they need to be. So let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll jump into it. God, I truly do thank you for this opportunity to be here, for the refreshing time that it's been already, to be back in Georgia, to be amongst our church family and the people that we count as family and our physical family. And God, I thank you for this time. I thank you for the opportunity you've given me to share, even though it's intimidating and scary. I know when we go through difficult things, they stretch us and they grow us. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to grow today and that I've been trusted just to come and speak. And so I know that I know it's not me who's a good teacher, but I know that you are. Your Holy Spirit is the teacher. And so I pray that you'll just bring to memory the things that I need to say, that I will say every word that you want me to and not one more. I pray that you give me clarity and direction to bring to memory the things that I've studied and prepared and that you've taught me. And I just pray that you give us a good time of fellowship as well for the rest of today. Amen. All right, so if you're in Matthew 15, we're just going to read 32 through 37, and then we'll kind of start breaking down a few things from that passage. All right, so Matthew 15:32 says, "Then Jesus called his disciples unto him and said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they continue with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And I will not send them away fasting, lest they faint in the way. And his disciples say unto him, Whence should we have so much bread in the wilderness as to fill so great a multitude? And Jesus saith unto them, How many loaves have ye? And they said, 7, and a few little fishes. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and the fishes, and gave thanks, and brake them, and gave to the disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And when they did all eat and were filled, they took up of the broken meat that was left 7 baskets full." So the first principle I have in your notes for you comes from verse 33 of this passage, and it's that God will ask you to do things that you can't do alone. So we see this again in verse 33. Yeah, I put alone on there because like saying that God will ask you to do things you can't do sounds kind of pessimistic. And it's more accurate to say that he's going to ask you to do things you can't do, but it's just, you just can't do it alone, right? I've accepted that God is going to continually ask me to do things that are outside of my capacity. So in our passage, Jesus is asking these disciples to feed a crowd of 4,000 people with 7 loaves of bread. And so we see by the disciples' response in verse 33 that they don't really understand how they could physically do that at all. They say, whence should we have so much bread in the wilderness as to fill such a great multitude? Like, they don't even see how it's possible in the place that they're at that many people could have food. And to me, this reaction is kind of interesting because it's not the first time that Jesus has fed a multitude like this. Like, this is, if you're reading through Matthew, this is the second time Jesus does this. Right? So if you want to go ahead and flip to Mark 6. I wasn't intending to have you guys flip around too much, but it's only one book. Go to Mark 6:36, and we're going to read the first account of when Jesus fed a multitude. Now, this is also in Matthew 14 in order, but I like some of the dialogue that we get here in Mark's account, so we're going to read it from Mark. All right, so Mark 36 through 42. So again, this is another time that Jesus is feeding a multitude in a very similar situation, but it's different times. So Mark 6:36 says, "Send them away that they may go into the country round about and into the villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat. And he answered and said to them, Give ye them to eat. And they say unto him, Shall we go and buy 200 penny worth of bread and give them to eat? And he saith unto them, How many loaves have you?" Just same question, right? "Go and see." And when they knew, they say, 5 and 2 fishes. And he commanded them all he commanded them to make all sit down by companies upon the green grass. And they sat down in ranks by hundreds and fifties. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, he looked up to heaven and he blessed and brake the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fishes divided he among them all. And they did all eat and were filled. So these 2 separate events, the first time that Jesus feeds a multitude of 5,000 people, I always wondered, kind of why the disciples seem really surprised when he says he's going to do the same thing again. And the first time they kind of had an idea, they're like, okay, we can send them away. It's a little different than the second time because they were kind of like, well, there's not even enough bread in this wilderness, right? They're not going to make it to the next place to get food. Where are we going to get enough bread? At least the first time they're kind of like, well, we can send them somewhere else, let them go buy their own food. And he says, no, you feed. And he says, okay, well, it seems like they thought I don't know how much 200 pennyworth is, but they thought that was enough because they're like, should we go buy that much bread? So they see this miracle happen, right? But they're trying to figure out how he's going to do this. And so I don't really, like I said, it's kind of surprising when the second time they're still kind of like, well, wait, how are we going to do this? But if you just read a couple of verses later, we kind of get an answer. In Mark 6, 51 through 52, now this is when Jesus is walking out, to the boat. The disciples are out in the boat, and Jesus comes walking to him. It kind of freaks him out a little bit. But when he gets there, verse 51 says, and he went up into the ship, and the wind ceased, and they were sore amazed in themselves beyond measure, and wondered, for they considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. So they didn't catch somehow the miracle that they had just seen. I don't know, the Bible doesn't tell us exactly how long this was, but it couldn't have been that long ago. So it's easy to think, how did they not consider this miracle? They started with 5 loaves of bread. 5,000 people ate from it, and they had more at the end than when they started. I don't know how you missed that, right? But then I realized that I do this a lot myself, right? I don't know if you guys ever do this. When you're praying about like a situation or a circumstance, a job, finances, family, sickness, whatever it is, it's easy to pray about things, and maybe even you pray about it to the point you kind of forget you're even praying about it, right? Then when God comes through, you're just kind of like, oh, I'm glad that worked out. That worked out pretty good. And you just kind of move on, right? And although I don't deserve it, but God has shown up in my life more times than I can count, because I usually don't learn things the first time either. He grows our faith. And so I put this little application point in your notes. This feels weird for me because I have never taught where I didn't have to click the things. So I'm just assuming the things behind me are correct. If they're not, that's probably my fault. I probably didn't send them the right thing. But under each point, I have these little applications of kind of what I drew from this. And the application is that God progressively grows our faith as he works through us to do things that seem impossible. So, as I've seen God come through in my life kind of over and over, the physical things that seemed impossible, and even now, I'm not as intimidated as I used to be. And I don't mean to say like, oh, I don't ever stress about things, like I've got it all figured out. It's just that when you've seen God come through, kind of like when you have kids, no matter how tired you get, you can always look back and be like, well, we've been tireder than this. That was a whole lot worse, right? And so I think there's always something I can look back to and say like, well, God came through bigger than this before. Like I don't really have to worry about this, right? So God has worked, and I've seen these physical things, but I still get intimidated by spiritual things that God asked me to do. Like I feel like he's still teaching me to trust him when he asked me to do something like today, something that I feel very incapable of doing, but he's asking me to do it. And I think this is a lot of times, you see that Jesus starts with these physical miracles and these physical signs, and then we start to see a transition between the physical miracles to these spiritual applications, right? So in these feedings, for Peter specifically, it took 2 miraculous feedings, 3 calls to spiritual feeding in John 21, and a great commission, but he did eventually get it, right? Because we see that in Mark. Now, I like Mark's account of the Great Commission because in Matthew, it kind of ends with the Great Commission. He says, amen, and it's like kind of over. But Mark, there's one more verse, and he says, and they went forth and preached everywhere, the Lord working with them and confirming the word with signs following. Amen. So we see that they responded. We know that they did from other accounts, but I like how Mark ends that they obeyed, like they got it. They obeyed, and they went and they did. And I know this is very devotional, so it's not a very straight line, but you see all of this feeding, and then it ends with like feed multitudes. Then now you've got to take one book, and it wasn't a fully baked loaf. They didn't have a complete Bible. He says, you got to go and teach the entire world everything that I taught you. that would feel a little bit more impossible than 4,000 or 5,000 people that are just hungry. But I also think it's really cool in 1 Peter 5, you hear Peter give the same thing that Jesus told him. He exhorts pastors. He gives them the same exhortation. He says, feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof. This is the same guy that Jesus had to tell him 3 times. He said, feed my lambs, feed my sheep, feed my sheep. Now Peter's telling others, feed the flock. So here's kind of my final thought with this point. You don't need to be intimidated when God asks you to do something impossible. Just don't try to do it on your own. Mark 10:27 says, and Jesus looking upon them saith, with men it is impossible, but not with God, for with God all things are possible. All right, letter B in your notes, and kind of my next application here from this passage is that God asks you to give what you have, not what you don't. So this is in verse 34. Of course, it's kind of simple. Jesus says, how many loaves have you? So, and it's kind of always interesting, when we see Jesus asking questions, and, I hear a lot of people say this. Whenever you're hearing Jesus ask questions, it's interesting for a guy who knows everything to ask as many questions as he does, right? I think Brandon said that. He's the ultimate question asker, right? So it catches my attention, as it should, when Jesus asks a question, because it can really be for only one of 2 reasons, right? Either he wants to reveal something to the person he's talking to, or it's to the reader, like a narrator. He's making sure that we have a recorded dialogue of what he's asking these guys. And I think it's usually both. I don't think it's only one or the other. I think normally it's both, because, we have a God who is not bound by time. So he is quite literally speaking to them and to us at the same time. Kind of, again, on the one hand, it's like a narrator making sure that we don't miss what he was doing. Because if he asks this question, is, well, how many loaves do you have? And then we get no response. They just say, and so they sat him down and they fed the multitude. It would be kind of easy to say, well, they must have had more than they thought. They must have had enough. It must have been okay. Kind of like, I didn't put this in my notes, but in Acts with the Ethiopian eunuch, where he asks a question, we get a response. He says, what hinders me to be baptized? We get an answer. This is for us to know that there is a question and an answer. But if you delete the answer, well, then it leaves a little bit of vagueness, right? So I think Jesus asked a lot of questions for us to understand, here's the question and here's the answer, even though he doesn't need an answer, of course. And it's not even to prove their heart to himself, because he already knows their heart. It's either to prove their heart to them or to let us know where it's at. So on the one hand, he's letting us know what's going on in this story. He's making it very clear, like, okay, I've got 7 loaves, that's it. There's nothing up the sleeve. And on the disciples' side, Jesus clearly wanted them to know what they were bringing to the table. And in fact, in the first account of this, or in the Mark account, he says, go and see. Like, okay, go make sure you what you actually have, so that you know what I do with it. He doesn't say, like, we'll just start feeding and, like, we'll just see where it goes. I think he wants them to know what they're bringing to the table. And he didn't ask, although they offered, he didn't ask how much would be enough. He didn't say, do you have at least 200 pennyworth? He just says, what do you have? And so my next little application point for this is that what you bring to the table is not enough. But God doesn't ask you to be enough. Right? He doesn't ask them to bring enough to the table. He doesn't ask me to bring enough to the table. And so it's okay to be insufficient in the thing that God has asked you to do. And what I mean by that is that it's okay to just kind of be a nobody. It's easy to be nobody. There's a whole lot less pressure when you don't have to put the weight on yourself to be sufficient to do this thing that God is actually the one doing anyway. And, to be honest, this is not a super hard thing for me, because of just personality-wise. Like, I don't want to be famous. I don't really want recognition. I don't like attention. I don't particularly love standing up here and talking today. I'm a bit of an introvert, but even if it's because of our personality and maybe we don't want attention, but we all want what we do to matter. We want it to be important, right? And attention is not the same thing as importance. Ministries and churches need role players. And so what I mean by that, I'm a big hockey guy. So if you're not, I'm going to use a little bit of a hockey illustration, so I'll try to explain as I go. Whether you're into it or not, you probably know we just had the Winter Olympics, and Team USA, both the men's and women's, they recently won gold. Like the first time in like 46 years, and then also this is the first time in like 12 years that NHL players had played in the Olympics. So to me, that was like, it was a lot of fun to watch. But anyway, even if you're just like a casual fan, you probably definitely heard about the goalie Connor Hellebuck, who just played an amazing tournament. Jack Hughes got his teeth knocked out in the final game and still came back and scored the winning goal. Like, these are names that probably everybody heard about, right? These are the stars of the game. These are the guys that get the attention, which is fine. They deserve it. That's okay. But a stat that really caught my attention, kind of as a little bit of a hockey nerd, was our penalty kill. So the Team USA penalty kill unit, which is like hockey special teams. So if you foul somebody, someone's got to sit in the box for 2 minutes and you can't replace them. So you're a man down. So they call it a penalty kill. So the men's penalty kill unit was 18 for 18, including a 5-on-3, which means like 2 guys fouled, and so they were down 2 players, in the gold medal game against Canada, like the best, highest scoring offense, in the tournament. And that was like really impressive to me, because the thing is, if that penalty kill hadn't been perfect, that game would have ended, we would have lost in regulation. Like, it wouldn't have even went to overtime. And so, to me, that really shows the importance of people who are willing to play a role, right? Everybody can't score the winning goal, but it takes an entire team of people. And so one of the guys that was big on that penalty kill was Vincent Trocheck from New York. And now it's hard to say like these guys are nobodies, because it's pretty much the top 25 American players in the NHL. So like everybody, they're all somebody. But the media's got to kind of make a thing of it. So they're pretending like these guys shouldn't have been there, right? And so they're asking these questions. The media's always kind of picking at these guys like, oh, so do you think you should have deserved to be on this team? There's other players who are better. And so I loved his response. He says, yeah, we heard all the talk, that we shouldn't be here. But listen, I'm not naive. I know that there's better players that have more skill in the NHL. But we were able to come here and we had a job to do. And it was to be good penalty kill guys, good face-off guys, and character guys. And so we took that role and we ran with it. And to me, that kind of mentality resonates with me. I'm glad that there wasn't like an interview process to build a dream team to go to Portland, because I would have to say the same thing. Like, I know that there is better people that you could send to Portland, but that's not what God is asking for. So if it's all based on what we think we're worth and what we think we can do, well then, yeah, there's better people, there's better players, more experienced, more relevant experienced guys that could go. But that's not what God asked me to do. He just asked me to go and to fill a role. And it's okay to be a role player. And I think the thing with that, there's, I mentioned in my testimony, I served as a deacon here, and we led children's ministry, and I had a lot of people ask me, and I don't mean anything negative towards people asking this question, but a lot of people are like, oh, so you're going to be, a deacon in Portland, and you're going to run the children's ministry? And it's like, well, I think, honestly, me and Thomas, I don't think we talked about it until we got there, but it was kind of like, well, I don't really think we need deacons at Portland. There's like 6 of us, so I don't think I need to be a deacon. I appreciate asking, but that's a role that was a necessity. It wasn't like a point of pride or like a role that was just some position of honor. It was like, the deacons were servants when they were needed to take pressure off the pastor, and we don't need that. So I don't need a title that's honestly would just be an honorary title so you don't lose it. To me, it's like, I don't really care what role I have or what it's called, and I think, and this isn't just to praise myself, I'm saying this is a thing that God taught me, is that, to be a role player, it's important to care more about the team succeeding than our own attention, or about our own position or recognition on that team. Like, okay, somewhere else you might be the superstar, but if you can go on a team and be like, I'll be the penalty kill guy, I'll lay out in front of a puck, that's fine, I'll take that role. We don't have to strive to give God good enough. He just asked us to give him all that we have. He doesn't expect anything more than that. Just like the bread, he didn't ask for them to give enough bread. He just said, just give me what you have. And we just have to make sure we don't give him less. If he asks for our loaves of bread, don't give him some of them, right? The next point in your notes is letter C, and it's kind of a little bit of a transition, kind of flows into it. So letter C is the only way that what we have is sufficient is when we surrender it to God. So I know I just talked about being insufficient, how that's good. That's true. But how that insufficiency becomes sufficient is when we surrender it to God. We see this in verse 36. So he takes the loaves, he blessed them, he gave it back to the disciples, and then they gave it to the multitude. And that's, as I said, that's how insufficiency becomes sufficient. So what do you think would have happened if the disciples had have tried to feed the multitude on their own that second time? Maybe if they had remembered what Jesus did the first time, they're like, oh, we saw him do this, we can do that. Yeah, we'll start feeding these guys. We got 7 loaves, we can do this. No big deal. Maybe we don't want to speculate what would have happened, but I think it would be pretty clear because I think we've all seen this happen. If the disciples had have tried to feed a multitude without Jesus performing a miracle, 7 loaves would not have been enough to feed 4,000 people. Or at least they wouldn't have been full. Right? Maybe they could have all had a crumb or two. But, the Bible tells us after they were fed that they were all filled, that they all ate and were filled. So for us, I think a good application point is that, if I try to make what I bring to the table sufficient, I'm just going to get burnt out, right? Like my 7 loaves would be gone, about 10 people would have eaten, and I would be done. And so if we start trying to do a spiritual work that only God can do in our flesh, we're going to get burnt out. We're going to come to the end of our means and we're going to fall short. And so it's kind of easy to say that ahead of time, like, okay, just don't do ministry in the flesh, right? But I think at some point we've all kind of done that, right? And sometimes that feeling of being a little burnt out might just be the first symptom that we even recognize. And I think sometimes we're even kind of scared of that word, because we've labeled this as like some irrecoverable condition, right? Like, oh, they're burnt out, like they're gone, they're gonna lose it, And I think sometimes that's because, this burnout, it's like the last excuse that people give when they just want to quit ministry. They're not actually looking for a solution, it's like, I'm just burnt out. It's to me, it's kind of like that irreconcilable differences when people are getting divorced. It's like, we're just not trying to agree anymore. Like we've given up on even trying to come to reconciliation. So, it doesn't mean it's unreconcilable. You're just not trying anymore. You don't want to. And I don't want to give too many examples or people feel like they're being called out, but like we've all seen that in ministry, right? Where the solution to people's feeling of being burnt out and tired and wanting to just quit things is something that we can actually see. There's a solution to it, but then they're like, oh, nah, I just need to quit. It's like, well, hold on, this is all you need. You just need to, okay, you're losing focus here. You just need to do this. It's like, nah, I'm done. I'm burnt out. But really, if something is burning out, like you just need to rekindle the flame, right? Maybe it needs some fuel, maybe it needs some oxygen, but it can be rekindled, right? Burning out is not like, oh, too late, there's nothing we can do about it. And like I said, we've probably all been there. We've all felt burnout. I know I have. Because the truth is, it's probably not good to say, but ministry is a grind a lot of times. Like it's hard, repetitive, sometimes boring work. And it's easy, especially, and so sometimes I think for me, I don't want to get ahead of my notes here. Personality-wise, I kind of like the stability. I enjoy like knowing what I'm going to do for a long time ahead of time and just know like, okay, I know how that fits into my schedule. I know how much time that takes. The danger in that is like, it's easy to get complacent in it. And then the burnout isn't like a quick flaming burnout. It's a slow fizzle of, I'm still doing the thing, but because it doesn't require me to constantly check back in and make sure that I'm on the right track, it's kind of easy to just be running really hard, but then looking around being like, am I in the right place still? Am I doing the right thing? And so for me, I've kind of recognized, I see Josh sitting in the room. So he was here with us in Portland back at the end of last year. And it's not in my notes, so I'm not gonna go like way off track here. But I was going through a tough time and I even felt bad because Josh was there and it was like, man, I'm really trying to, I felt like I didn't have much left. I was tired. I wasn't upset. Nothing was really wrong or mad. It's just like, I was tired though. And we were coming to the end of the summer and, Josh being there's something he shared that was just really meaningful to me. And it made me sit and think, and I could see his counselor's heart coming out because he was like talking to me and it was really helpful for me to recognize, nothing's really wrong per se. But something that I can do, like I said, is just kind of be running really hard because like, okay, I pointed in that direction. I'm just going for it. And when I stop communicating, stop asking questions, stop making sure that I am where I need to be, I start feeling burnt out because like, I don't really know if this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It's sometimes just a little bit of a lack of clarity or understanding expectations, maybe not understanding the vision or there's too much change. And what I don't want you to hear is that any of this isn't pointed at Thomas. When there's a lack of communication, a lot of times it's a lack of our requesting information and asking, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I still on the right track? Am I going the right way? is this still your vision for this ministry? And, I don't feel like I usually need a lot of validation, but there's times it's like, okay, but I do need to know, because I'm not the pastor, I need to know that I'm on the right track still. Otherwise, it is an easy kind of fizzle, right? And so kind of a little bit of a universal thought here is, I think people will do really hard things when they believe in the mission and they understand the value of their role in that. So when they know what they're doing and they understand why, people will push through some pretty difficult circumstances. And I think that's a little bit of a key, especially for people like me, to prevent being burnout in ministry. It's not really putting people in, for one, not putting people in an all or nothing situation of like, you're either 100% in or you're all the way out, because we feel shame and like, I'm getting a little burnout and I don't really know what to do about it. The best thing to save face is just claim that I'm burnt out and just get out of it altogether, rather than try to admit that I don't really know where I'm going right now. And I think sometimes, although that's an immaturity on our part, as a leader, it's good to just not put people in that situation to where like you need to feel embarrassed about being tired. It's okay. Like, let's regroup. Let's, just kind of let's figure out what's making you feel burnt out. If you need a little bit of a rest, like that's okay, but don't quit. And, I think another big part of that is that, serving can't replace being fed. I think that's something that happens kind of naturally by accident, is we start serving so much that we're burning fuel and it's not being replaced. And so again, we tend to burn a little bit too much. So we have to remember that we've got to be fed. That keeps us going, right? And the last thing, so kind of is on a leadership side of it for people, is we have to make sure that we're continually envisioning the purpose of what they're doing. If people are like, well, hey, a year and a half ago, you told me to do this thing, and then I didn't hear anything else about it. Is this still what you want me doing? Like, if we don't really know, we tend to start putting less and less effort into that thing, right? Because we're not really sure if that's what needs to be done anymore. And again, sometimes that's just asking, like ask to sit down with your pastor. Be like, hey, this is a thing you put me on. And if you're one of those people that can do a boring thing for a long time, that's where that complacency can set in. Because you're not going to quit doing it. You're just going to start putting in less effort the more you go down that trail. And then kind of like, to Josh's running illustration, you look around, you're like, I haven't passed a checkpoint in a minute. I don't see any other runners. Is this where I'm supposed to be? I'm running really hard, but I don't know if I'm on the right track. And sometimes it's as simple as just kind of getting back on the right track. So I didn't put in my notes, but in the situation for me, it was really just sitting down with Thomas. And I think that made me realize, like, man, I just need to check my heart, make sure I'm still really behind what Thomas is wanting me to do in this. And I think a thing we realized is that there was kind of a place where there was a need that had a little bit more clarity, a little bit more vision. I kind of understood what it needed, and there's no less work involved, but I feel way more energetic to do something that I really understand his vision and what he wants from it. I understand my role in it, and I can go kind of keep running again when I understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so that was really good for me. And all of this kind of just comes back, though, as just not trying to be sufficient, like just surrender what you have to God, and let him use it however he wants. Don't be like, well, I'm good at this, so I'll serve in that ministry at this capacity, but just surrender what you have. Let him use it however, and I think it's probably a much more complex thing for people. But I think just recognizing, don't get burnt out. Maybe you just need some clarity. Maybe you just need to recognize, okay, stop trying to do a thing that he didn't call you to do. Like I talked about roles a minute ago. If you're not supposed to be scoring all the goals, don't try to score all the goals, because you're going to get frustrated when you don't, All right, our final point for our personal applications from this passage is letter D. And it's that our ability in ministry is an outflow of what God gives us. So we see this in verse 36 through 37. So I touched on this a minute when I read it. It says, and he took the 7 loaves and the fishes, and gave thanks, and he brake them and gave to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude, and they did all eat and were filled. And they took up of the broken meat that was left 7 baskets full. So, of course, this is kind of a clear picture of discipleship. Jesus is committing to the faithful men are committing to others. That's our classic. I didn't even put the reference in here because I was sure we're going to hear it 2 or 3 times this week. So the 2 Timothy 2:2 reference, right? We see this in a very physical sense of how Jesus is delegating this feeding necessity. But I like how I mentioned a minute ago, it says that they did all eat. So that flow from Christ, it fed the disciples and it fed the crowd, right? So with this flow, like, I don't want to make disciples of me. I want to make disciples of Christ, right? So I only want to give others the things that Christ gave me. That way they look like him and they don't look like me, right? But the only way that we can do that is if we are abiding in him, right? John 15:5 says, I am the vine and ye are the branches. He that abideth in me and I in him, the same bringeth forth much fruit, for without me ye can do nothing. And I really don't think I can say it better than that, but here's kind of my personal application for it. You know, we know that God uses ministry to grow us as leaders, but not if we bail on the growth process ourselves. You know, sometimes with good intentions, we get so caught up worrying about helping everyone else that we neglect to make sure that we're fed, you know, to stay healthy enough to continue to feed others. And I mentioned this just briefly in kind of that feeling a little burnout. Another thing that I think was kind of crucial for me is realizing like I needed to be challenged for myself. Like I signed up to take an LFBI class, which, you know, I had done before, but in the busyness, like I kind of just didn't do that after we left. And I realized, although we're constantly studying, constantly serving, constantly helping others, there wasn't anything that I was doing that was challenging me to learn something new, or even if, you know, I think I'm taking a class that I had taken before, but like, okay, challenge me to take it now to a deeper level of understanding of that topic. And it's not even necessarily something that I'm going to be able to teach others, especially not right now. Like it's not something that I need for someone else. I need to be challenged myself to keep growing, to keep being fed. You know, we've done this before on accident. I can look at it now and think it's kind of funny. When we first took over children's ministry here, we were in our I don't remember which level of things we were in, probably leadership training. And I quit my job. We knew that God was calling us to be more involved in ministry. We were making changes to align to make time for it. And then as soon as we did that, we took over children's ministry. I left my job. And then I think the next semester, we dropped out of our leadership training class that we were in. And I can only think now, you know, James's thought to that is like, oh, man, what are you doing? Like you're taking steps forward and then like one step back, right? And now listen, if you've done that, it's okay. If you're at a place where you need a minute, that's okay. If you skip a semester, skip a term, however you guys do your classes, but just don't skip 2, right? Get back in there. Don't let that be a sliding away of your own growth. But yeah, I did that. It's kind of like, well, I need more time to serve, and I started to kind of neglect being challenged to keep growing myself. And again, I think that's what leads us into complacency. And I think that contributes to burnout if we're not careful. But you know, to kind of carry along with that vine illustration, you know, the more people you have under you, the more leadership you have, I put it this way because it was relatable. The more fruit you have hanging on your branch, the stronger it has to be secured to the vine, right? So that branch, it's like we're not the fruit, we're the branch if we're feeding others. And the more people are hanging on you, if you're not very securely attached, you might fall off, and if you fall off, the fruit dies and you die. Right? We saw in that thing that the flow from Christ, the disciples ate too. They were all filled. But if you cut that off, like it's going to hurt the people under you, it's going to hurt you too. But you know, a way that also worked for us here at Oakland Heights is, you know, God taught us the things that we needed as we needed it, right? Through the structure, and it's not like they plan this out like, well, we know what you're going to run into in ministry, so here's a class for that, and then next you're going to deal with this type of counseling thing, so here's a class for it. It's just, God knows those things, right? And so when you just submit to the structure of growth that your church has in place and you just do those things, God's going to give you the things that you need as you need it. So things like, you know, counseling classes. The more we took the intro to counseling, I think is what it was. So we took that class, and then it's like now all of a sudden there's opportunities to share that counsel. People are coming to us in our ministry, and it's like, okay, I don't have to pass this on anymore because I know exactly what Thomas would say about this. I know exactly how James would handle this. And if not, I can just ask them. I can be like, hey, here's the situation. Here's what I think I need to do. Is that cool? Okay, I'll talk to him. But you know, that growth, it was an outflow of like, okay, as I'm learning and growing, the counseling wasn't per se for me, but it helped me know how to help others. And so it was growing me so that I could help take some of that load off, you know, carry that fruit a little bit on my own. You know, same with process of spiritual growth. It helped, I'm going to get into this point in a minute, but it helped a lot with understanding and evaluating kind of where people were in their growth. And as I talk in a minute about discipleship within your ministry, it really helps to recognize where people are, because then you know what they need to do next. It's like, okay, you're not ready to teach yet. I can see where you're at in your growth, but we can give you an opportunity assisting a teacher. Or maybe they've been teaching for a long time. And it's like, okay, actually you're at a point, you need to lead some other people. So you don't need to just be teaching a class, even though you're great at it. You need to now lead other people in a class. You need to train teachers. You know, so when we can understand how this process of spiritual growth works, we can identify it in our ministry, right? So these are the things that as you grow, it's how it affects your ministry, right? So I put the application point in your notes that especially when you become a leader, don't neglect your personal growth. So, for us now, being in Portland, we don't have MT, LT, all those things. So, for us, LFBI is a great resource to I just try to I've been taking one class, right? It's just like one thing challenged me. Yes, it's busy. I hate writing papers, so it's like the thought of having one more thing to write is overwhelming, but you just learn it. Even if it's something you think just get a little deeper. And of course, you can't neglect your devotions. You can't neglect, all those things also are feeding you, but you need to make sure you're still getting some depth. All right, with the last bit of time I have, I want to talk about 4 ministry principles for developing leaders. So these ministry principles for developing leaders, I worded that way on purpose because you can really take it 2 ways. These are intended to be ministry principles for helping you develop leaders, and they are also ministry principles for you as a developing leader. So this is going to be a little bit more kind of rapid fire. And these are not really coming from just like one singular passage, and so I know that's not good preaching, so good thing I'm not preaching this morning. But what I wanted to do is really just kind of compile like the 4 most important ministry principles that I've learned from other people and totally stole from them. These are not principles that I pretend to do perfectly. It's not things that I came up with, but it's things that were really impactful and that God has taught me and is really still teaching me. And so some of these are going to go a little bit farther back. Sorry if they're not super cohesive, but I'm going to give them to you. There's 4 things. Letter A in your notes is that the vision that you set for your ministry must reflect your pastor's vision for the church. And that wouldn't have been something that I thought that I didn't get, but it is something that, again, you can drift without really noticing it and not really on purpose, but you have to constantly make sure that whatever you're doing in your ministry, because you're, to use a Midtown term, you're not in a silo, right? You're not doing your own thing. You need to be making sure that your vision is being accomplished within the vision of the church is being accomplished within your ministry, because you probably have just like one small demographic of people, but the vision for them is the same. A great resource for that, by the way, is Kenny Morgan wrote a book called The Cupbearer. And I read that right as we were leaving to Portland, and that's a great book. I know he gears it, I think it says like for assistant pastors or something. If you're in any kind of ministry role leading people, I think that's a great book for you to read. It's easy, take a couple hours to read it, it's great. But it really focuses on this point of having your pastor's heart. And, it's not about you, it's about if God has put, if you're a man under authority. So this isn't like strictly from the book, this was kind of just my takeaway from it. If you're a man under authority, and of course all authority comes from God, but if you have another human between you and God in ministry, then your vision has to reflect the vision that God has given your leader. 2 Timothy 2, verses 3 through 4. Right after our famous discipleship passage, Paul says, "No man that warreth entangleth himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who hath chosen him to be a soldier." So again, it's not the soldier isn't out to accomplish his own personal mission that he came up with, right? If you're in leadership, you delegate those things, but even in the sense of when it talks about who hath chosen him to be a soldier, yes, in the broadest sense, so if you're in the military, of course, you serve the country as a whole, right? But the country isn't the one giving you orders. You have someone right above you that says, in your duty, this is the thing that you need to do. And so your goal is to accomplish, do whatever it takes, sacrifice your life if it takes it, to please him who hath chosen you to be a soldier. And for you, that means the person ahead of you that's just right ahead that says, this is the thing that we're doing today. This is the most important thing. You don't have to understand how it falls into the whole. If you're under authority, you just have to make sure that the vision that you're exemplifying in your ministry has the heart of your pastor. For us, when we were here at Oakland Heights, Thomas was the children all the way to college, like youth, I don't remember, was student pastor, youth pastor, over all these things. So I worked under Thomas. And one of the things he did was have us develop a vision statement for our ministry. And that was super helpful. I think it's helpful for them to be able to see, like, make sure you kind of understand what they want you to do. But for us to have to put on paper, to have a clear vision of what our role is within the church, helps you communicate it really clearly to others. So one of our main goals, as Lori and I were leading children's ministry, was that our vision for Ignite reflected James's vision for the church. So, I know how it is at Oakland Heights, probably very similar for all of you, the know, grow, go, right? So I knew this is the vision of the church. Discipleship is key. We want people to know Jesus, we want them to grow in their faith, and then we want to send them out into the mission. And so we have to what of those three things can we accomplish with children, right? So as a children's ministry, how do we accomplish all three of those goals, right? So for the go part, we're not sending children out as missionaries. So when you're talking about the demographic of children, we did have in our vision statement that we believe that every child between when we get them in kindergarten and send them out at 6th grade, pretty much every child is going to come to the ability to understand their need for salvation. So being evangelistic at every opportunity we had was kind of very important, because we can help accomplish it at our level and within our ministry. We can work on know. We can also work on grow. So any child who gets saved, we had a goal that then we want to help them understand the basic fundamentals of this new relationship that they have with Christ. And so we had with the kids, there's the know, there's the grow, but like I said, we didn't really have go. But also, children were not the only thing in our ministry. Although that is the demographic that we ministered to, we had 70-something adults that served with us in children's ministry. And so in them, it's probably not trying to get them to know Jesus, because we definitely would hope that they're all saved if they're serving in children's ministry. All right, so with the adults, we're not trying to do know, but we definitely are trying to do grow and go, right? We can use our ministry as a little incubator to help people grow as they're going through discipleship and they're doing all the other things that they should be doing in the church. This is a place that our leadership should be able to put them to keep growing and equip them to go, right? Because the adults, we always say you can be a missionary right where you are. So our adults can definitely be going with these children. They're sharing the gospel with these children. They're helping them come to know Christ, right? So they need to be involved in the church's growth. I've just put it in here that we have to make sure that our volunteers and leaders are involved in our church's growth process. And I think that really kind of encompasses this whole concept that we just have to make sure that they are accomplishing the vision of the church, that we are not siloed off. I mentioned I was in the Navy, and there used to be a term people would say that someone was OFP. It meant that they were on their own freaking program, and that it was never a compliment, right? You don't want that to be said of you, because we're not on our own program. We're not trying to be siloed off to be accomplishing something different than the rest of the church. With whatever responsibility we're given, we need to be accomplishing the vision of the church and our pastors within the people that they've entrusted to us. And that hasn't changed. Being in Portland now, I'm leading our college ministry, which sounds fancy, but we have one Bible study at a college campus, and that's our whole college ministry. And we do the same thing. So I sat down with Austin and Talia, if you guys have met them. I'm discipling Austin, and it's honestly they both graduated from Portland State. Their heart is really what got us into the college campus, because they're the ones that had a burden for this. And not that we didn't, but we're two older guys coming in from Georgia. We don't have any connections here. We don't even know how to go about renting space, meeting people, but they did. And so anyway, one of our goals, though, we sat down with them, and we wanted to lay out a vision for our Bible study group. It's such a small thing, but this is a ministry, and we want to make sure that so we don't drift into doing our own thing, that our vision for our college Bible study reflects the vision that Thomas has for all of our Bible studies. So, for example, he wants them to be evangelistic. Okay, then we're going to make sure that we are being evangelistic on purpose with the opportunities that we have within our group. We don't want to be siloed off. We didn't want to have all these Bible studies that are their own identities. We're not trying to start 3 or 4 different churches. This is only a connection point to get them plugged into the church. So, we want to funnel people into our church as a whole. So, things like Austin and Talia are constantly giving people rides. And Lori and I try to help with that, but with all our kids, our cars are normally full, and they take the brunt of making sure that those students have a way to get to church. in Portland, we're not that far away from the college, but most people don't have cars. So sometimes it's really hard to just get people even halfway across town. And so that's a big sacrifice, but it's really central to making sure that like, okay, our Bible study doesn't just exist over here where they live and we never force them to connect. And so some of our biggest victories that we celebrate is when we see our college students making connections and hanging out with other people in the church that don't go to our Bible study. Like that's what we want. And the other thing with it being evangelistic is a huge win is anytime they bring a friend. It's like, that's not someone we invited. They brought a friend. That's a huge win because we're starting to accomplish that evangelism. They're starting to get involved in it, right? And these are all goals of what Thomas has for our church as a whole. We want to make sure that we're not, again, coming up with our own vision and goals. We just want to do what he wants in Bible studies and within our Bible study. So, yeah, if you have a level of influence and a ministry to lead, just make sure that whatever vision you're setting is very clear how it integrates into your pastor's vision for your whole church. All right, I said rapid fire, but I'm running out of time. Letter B, you must maintain a discipleship mentality within your ministry. So if you're here this week, I'm going to assume that your church values discipleship, and it's probably at the core of everything you do. I can speak for Oakland Heights because I was here. I know that that's true. And only in a day and a half, we heard from Code today, so I know that's true at his church. We heard Joe say this. He said, it is the central ministry of Decatur Baptist Church. Now, I knew that, but now I can say confidently because he just said it yesterday. And I would guess that most of the pastors that we hear speak this week are going to say something very similar. So as it was for us here at Oakland Heights, it's the same with us at Portland. Discipleship is the central ministry. And so again, kind of similar to the last point, how you need to figure out how to incorporate a discipleship mentality into anything that you're doing. I think it was 4 years ago maybe, Brandon taught a set of lessons or sessions here called Pervasive Discipleship. And if you weren't here for that, I think he took like 3.5 hours. So that there's so much more information and so much you can get from that. I just watched that again recently myself. So I would encourage you to go back. They're on our YouTube thing. I don't really know. I say that and then it's like, well, maybe they're not. I think they are. But you should go back and watch those things. If you're leading a ministry, you need to make sure that discipleship is incorporated into what you're doing. And I'm going to tell you a little bit what that means, kind of briefly. Again, you should go watch those sessions. I think they were so impactful for us. They were very influential for us at the time because we didn't know 4 years ago that we were 2 years out from turning over our ministry and moving to Portland. We didn't know that at the time. It was just like, man, that was just really impactful for us, but God knew. And, one of the big takeaways that we had from that is that you have to make leadership development part of your ministry's goals. And that's really what discipleship is, right? It's just growing people. It's taking them from like babies to adults. That's leadership development. It's just personal development. That is what discipleship is. And you've got to find ways to build that into the mentality that you have within your ministry. It's not going to happen by accident. What actually will happen by accident, as with basically everything, is that you're just going to do whatever's easiest, right? The easiest thing is going to put people where it's the least work for you, where they're not going to call out, where they're faithful, they're going to be there. It maybe isn't really growing them anymore, but that's what's easy for you. And it's hard to say like, well, if I take them out of there, it means now I've got to train a new person to do the thing that I finally don't have to think about. Now I'm going to have to constantly be thinking about that role again. So that's not an easy thing to do, but that is crucial if we want to develop leaders for them to have this discipleship mentality built in, right? It's hard to balance our ministry needs with individual needs, but we have to consider what's best for that person and what's best for the ministry. So sometimes one wins over the other, right? Like, it would be great for you to do this other thing, but actually I can't move you right now because I just can't. But we can't just say, so that's an excuse to leave you there forever. But we do have to constantly be evaluating and saying, like I mentioned earlier with, okay, so you've gone through these certain levels of spiritual growth. Maybe you're an MT, okay, so maybe you don't need to be just like coming and putting together snacks. Like if you're learning how to study the Bible, you need to be teaching. So we got to find a role for you to teach somewhere. We got to constantly be evaluating. So sometimes that's hard. It's like, oh man, now I have to teach someone else how to do the thing that they were doing. And they're not going to do this as good as the last person that was doing it. So now it's going to be more work. And the saying, if you want it done right, do it yourself. Well, if you want it done your way, you got to do it yourself. But it's it's hard to take someone who is doing something well and doing it right and then moving them, and then it's like you got to trust someone else to come in and make a mess of it for a while and learn how to do it again. But you have to constantly allow that to happen, right? You got to strive to maintain that discipleship mentality, because it'll slip away from you and you'll just turn into a production mentality. Again, for us with kids, it's easy to stop saying like, well, what will be best for the teachers? Because it's probably not going to be best for us. And it's easy to let it turn into just like a production. Like, well, what we actually have to do is we got to put on this many services, we got to have this many classes filled, and we got to have this many teachers. And it's easy to let that start being the focus versus like, okay, but what's going to grow the people that are doing those things, right? And so like I said, Brandon took 3 days talking about it. That's a much bigger topic. I'm not pretending like I just covered all of it, but it's crucial though that you keep that mentality forefront. All right, letter C, you must allow your ministry to be a training environment. Proverbs 14:4 has been, and I know a lot of these verses aren't on the screen, that's my fault. Proverbs 14:4 says, where no oxen are, the crib is clean, but much increases by the strength of the ox. So this is a verse we talk about all the time in Portland. You got to let stuff get messy to get stuff done. And I think this is a good segue from our last thing, because if you let people do things and learn how to do it, they're not going to do it the way you want it at first. They may never do it how you want it, and that's really not the most important thing, but they're probably going to make a little bit of a mess, right? And I'm not saying, it's easy to keep our ministries clean and organized the less people we have serving, the less people we're training, but this is the place where it should be safe to fail and to learn. And by fail, I don't mean sending people out there to do things that they're not equipped to do. Really, the biggest difference between a training environment and a real life environment is just supervision, right? So the ministry, as we allow these ministries to be a training environment, it doesn't mean that it's fake ministry. Even as you're growing, it's real ministry now. Real ministry is not waiting out there somewhere. So even if you feel like, man, I'm in a training environment, I'm still learning, it's like, okay, but the people that you're discipling as you're learning how to disciple, you're changing their life right now. There's not this like, well, I'm practicing on all these people, but one day I'll do real ministry. And I think that attitude can lead to a lot of discontentment. It's when we're not content realizing like, okay, but I want to go do that. I want to go plant a church. I want to go make disciples. It's like, okay, well, anyone that you evangelize and disciple here is of equal value and importance as anything you're going to do anywhere else, right? The people of Portland are not more valuable than the people in Cartersville. The disciples are not any more real disciples. The training environment, it kind of goes back to playing your role and learning contentment and saying like, okay, but what if God never calls you to do that? Will you be content saying like, okay, what if I always stay here and train other people? What if I never get to go do that thing? Because then we start making it about us and the things that we actually think we want to do, instead of saying it's not about me, it's about the team winning. So, I can find contentment saying I'm going to stay here and do this thing as long as it takes, because it's not about me achieving ministry sometime, right? Growth in ministry is constant no matter where you are. So I think there's a big thing with feeling burnout is not having contentment and saying like, real ministry is happening now. The rapture could come before you ever get to the thing that you think you're supposed to do. I didn't know I had my alarm on, but I do. But anyway, so sometimes though that can leave us a little bit bored, because we're like, well, I want to go do that other thing. I want to go move on. I want to go do this next thing in ministry that feels like that's going to be where it's really real. And then that boredom can turn into a little bit of burnout, but being bored does not constitute a calling to a new ministry. Sometimes we say, well, they're kind of getting burnt out, and it's really just they're getting bored with it. And maybe they need to learn to be content and like, okay, but that's going to be, the newness will wear off. If you don't like making a disciple now, well, guess what? Discipleship is the same thing when you go do it somewhere else, and it'll get hard. You're going to have the same problems, the same things that you're helping people grow through. It's going to be the same thing. Right? If you can't be content doing it here, when the newness wears off in the new place or the new church or the new whatever, you're going to get bored there too, right? We got to learn contentment to just be where God has us now. And I think, again, this is easy to look back and say, but people always say, you wish you knew when you were in the good old days. Well, the days when you're learning and growing and you're co-laboring with people, Oakland Heights, now Portland is amazing. It's the good old days now for the future, but Oakland Heights are our good old days now. We can look back and be like, man, I miss these people. We sat in these classes together. We grew together. We served together. Those were the good old days. And it wasn't fake ministry. We were learning and growing and bringing people with us. And we're doing that in Portland. And one day we'll look back at Portland and Ethan's going to look back with us and be like, oh, you remember that time where we were in that building and there was 5 of us and we were the first 4 people being discipled or whatever it was. Like those are going to be the good old days one day. So don't neglect them. Don't be so quick and just like can't wait to get out of the good old days. Just enjoy where God has you. Learn to be content. I don't know exactly what time I was supposed to be done, but my alarm went off. So I'm about to wrap up here. I got one more point. So my last point is that you must pray. And maybe appropriately I left it as the last point, even though it really shouldn't be. But there is way too many times that it is kind of the last thing we think about. And it's kind of the last thing that we resort to when maybe we don't know what to do anymore. But another verse that has been really meaningful to us in Portland is Psalms 127:1. And it says, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. And except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. So with all of these, anything that we want to do, all these principles that we think we have figured out, if God's not doing the work, like we talked about the vine, we talked about abiding, we talked about all of these different principles today, and we say this a lot, but we kind of don't always put it into practice, that if God's not doing the work, no amount of strategy or principles is going to get the work done. And the biggest way that we activate God working our ministries is by praying and asking him for things. And there's so many, like there could be a whole session on how to pray for your ministry in whatever stage it's in, but I just want to end it with this. It was a verse that I think it was Daniel shared this yesterday, James 5:16. It tells us that the fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. The prayer is not you just letting God know what's going on. It's you communicating with him and asking him to work in the thing that he's called you to do, right? That's what activates God. And he's not bound by our lack of prayer, but sometimes what he's going to do within us is bound by our lack of prayer, right? So don't forget, pray for people, pray for yourself. Man, you don't want to spend your time laboring in vain. You want God to build a house, build a ministry. That's it. Like I said, I don't fully know who I'm supposed to turn over to, but James is coming. That's all I've got to say about it. So I'm going to turn it over to James and let him close us out. Thank you, guys.
So rare is the time that I get a chance to listen to David teach. I'm super thankful for you. I want you to know, to our church, you're a hero. And, a lot of times position players, role players, like you talked about, don't get the FaceTime on the news or whatever. But no, we're praying for you in House of Prayer. We love you. All of us that know anything look up to you, man. And as a church planter, I know it's the team. It's not necessarily the planter. And so you're a huge blessing, I know, to Thomas, and we love you. Today's been good. Just hearing those, a lot of things that I would have said I know, or when I hear it, I'm like, oh yeah. And then I recognize how I dropped the ball in that area. So thank you for that today. Like for real, like things are, it's like I need like a constant calibrating and reminding myself of things I got to do. I'm a developing leader, and as I try to develop others, hopefully you got something from today. The Lord's ministered to you. You can go back with a little sharpened, a little more focused and intention with what you're doing in your ministry, how you align those, and for your own personal health. If you're considering being on a church plant team, I would go back and I would look over that, listen, find it on YouTube, pray over each one. You just had somebody who's been on the team, who's in the throes of it, and telling you this is what you're going to face. So if you're thinking about being on a church planting team or stepping out into some ministry area that's unfamiliar to you, you'd be foolish not to hear those words as somebody who's been down that path. Man, it's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We're going to be dismissed in just a moment, and I want to let pastors know that we have a luncheon. If you're a pastor, meet us over here. We have some barbecue prepared, and I know all the KC people. I know what you're thinking. The sauce is boss, and there's probably some sauce there somewhere. I don't know. We don't do a whole lot with sauce. but there's probably some over there. But actually, no. I lied to you right now. That's what I need to repent. We're not doing barbecue tonight. Everybody's getting barbecue at the dinner. Dinner tonight is at 5:30, and then you come and eat barbecue, and then there'll probably be some sauce there. And then there's the service at 6:30. You don't want to miss that. If you're a pastor, we have something else planned for you. It's called Henry's Louisiana Grill. It's Cajun food, and with a little, because we're in the South, you got some grits coming to you too. So. Just a little Southern treat. But we do want to fellowship and get together, and we want to get to know you. And some of us, we already know each other to be able to hang together. So meet us over there, just get things settled, and then come over. I'm going to pray for us. So if you're a pastor, you don't have to wait for somebody to pray for you to eat. You can just go ahead and eat. And maybe if you're not a pastor, you're going somewhere to eat, you can just count this as the Lord's blessing over your food. All right, Father, we love you. I'm reminded with my brother Code and David just how good you've been to us, to me. God, thank you. And thank you for what you're doing in their lives, what you're doing in the churches of our fellowship and our endeavors to be faithful with what you've given to us. God, help us to commit it to faithful men. And God, we trust you to do the work, to do all the sanctifying process as we try our best to fit the model of your word, to do what your son Jesus did. God, I pray that you'd help us. Give us wisdom, God, and work your power through us. And God, we pray for the food that we're about to enjoy. I pray that you bless it to our bodies, for the fellowship that we'll enjoy together. God, I thank you for it, and I pray that you'd use us to strengthen each other, to sharpen each other like iron. And I pray it all in Jesus' name. Amen. See you this evening.